Thank you for joining us this morning. My name's Luke Mellor, one of your 2020 conference reps. We'll be bringing you the top stories from this year's Methodist Conference. Welcome to ND Conference News. This year, due to the global pandemic, the Methodist Conference met virtually. Rather than gathering from across the country, members of conference found themselves retiring to offices, living rooms, kitchens and bedrooms to gather together online. This is the first time that the Methodist Conference has not met physically, but in the face of adversity, the business of Methodism went on. Each day, lay and ordained representatives from each district gathered to discuss important issues and then vote on resolutions and motions. One of the key issues facing this year's conference was that of inclusion, diversity and equality. So now we go to James for this report.
Thanks, Luke. This year, you couldn't move for discussions around equality, diversity and inclusion, or EDI for short. First, the conference renewed Methodism's commitment to fighting racism, declaring that racism is a denial of the gospel and also the denomination opposes and rejects all other forms of unjust discrimination, including homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. Further promising to monitor, record and tackle instances of racism in all areas of its work, all of which will be accountable to the newly formed Scrutiny Committee reporting to Council. Due to coronavirus putting a stop to in-person meetings, the decision was taken to postpone any decisions regarding the report God and Love Unites Us to the 2021 conference taking place in Birmingham. That's all from me for now. Back to Luke in the studio.
Thanks, James. Now, the Evangelism and Growth team brought the conference the new Methodist evangelism strategy, known as God for All. We go now to Nick for more information.
Thanks, Luke. This year, the Methodist Conference voted overwhelmingly to embrace a new strategy for evangelism and growth called God for All. In the face of declining Methodist church numbers, God for All is about helping new people become disciples of Jesus, starting hundreds of new churches, and raising up new lay and ordained leaders to seek out where God is moving across Britain. The strategy involves a significant investment of time and resources in developing young evangelists, serving marginalised communities, expanding the church's digital presence, and helping Methodists live out their faith in everyday life. We are all challenged to become evangelists and live God-centred lives, so we can share Jesus' love and make our churches into beacons of hope. God for All is not built to be a quick fix. It's a direction of travel and gospel transformation for the long-term future. It all starts with a 5-year plan that launches this month, with a focused year of prayer that will offer the church's work to God. I'm really excited to see how we seek God's mission to declare the gospel across our nation, bringing new disciples to Jesus, who stand on his word and worship in spirit and truth. Now, back to Luke in the studio.
Thank you, Nick. Now, back in 2017, the Methodist Conference directed the Joint Advisory Committee on the Ethics of Investment, or JACI, to look into the ethics of the Methodist Church's investment in fossil fuel companies, especially in the light of ongoing climate change. Their report was brought before conference this year, and here is Janet to tell us more.
Thank you, Luke. Well, there have been 3 years of solid hard work by JACI, the Joint Advisory Committee on the Ethics of Investment, working on their climate change brief, looking into the fossil fuel companies that the Methodist Church invests in, and working against a backdrop of continuing temperature rises across the globe. Conference accepted the JACI report on its work over the past year. This included important updates on businesses that the Central Finance Board, the CFB, invest in on our behalf. Jackie have concluded that many are working in ethically acceptable ways to reduce their environmental impact. There were others that have been disinvested from. This left a number of companies that the CFB continues to have in its investment portfolio that were judged to be still working towards or are on the borderline of making acceptable changes to their practices. A notice of motion was presented to conference and things began to hot up a little. The request was that Jackie recommend disinvestment to the CFB before the 2021 conference. So in less than a year from now, disinvestment from all oil and gas companies that are not currently aligned with the Paris Agreement target of a global temperature rise well below 2 degrees. I held my breath. This seemed like a pretty radical move, but not before time, as time is rapidly running out for the life of the planet as we know it. However, life is also running out for the Methodist Church, and the CFB has a duty of care in managing the ever-shrinking finance part of what is a struggling and shrinking denomination, especially after the COVID times we have been living through. I listened with care. There was a pretty dusty response to the notice of motion. The message was clear. To disinvest from these remaining companies in just 1 year could be ruinous. Conference resolved to refer the request to the Methodist Council. Conference rumbled on past the climate emergency. And back to the studio.
Thank you for that, Janet. Also received by conference was a report from the Central Finance Board. They provide a report to conference every year. Jenny has the details.
Good morning, Luke. Well, delegates had a lot to consider when Tim Swindell, the Connectional Treasurer, presented conference with the Central Services budget for the coming year. Whilst adopting the budget, conference recognised that there would need to be significant changes in these figures in light of the financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Church's income and investments. The Treasurer reported that income was already down by millions of pounds sterling, whilst current savings are only in the hundreds of thousands. District, circuits and local churches will soon begin to see the effects of the financial crisis as all grant giving is now suspended. Methodist Council are instructed to review all activities planned for the coming year to ensure only necessary work goes ahead and that any expenditure should be reduced to a minimum. Local churches are asked to look at their mission plan and spend wisely. Is there a crisis looming? Maybe, but conference were reminded that most churches have reserves put aside for a rainy day. It's time to realise that it's pouring outside. The only way forward is to act connectionally. As individual churches, don't be short on generosity. Instead, share the millions of pounds stashed away in church bank accounts and investments so that God's work can continue in our communities. And now, back to the studio.
Many thanks, Jenny. Now, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the 3Generate gathering of November 2020 has had to be cancelled. However, the Methodist Council came to conference with a new initiative, and we go to James to hear more.
Disappointingly, like many other events, COVID-19 has hit 3Generate, the annual gathering of people aged from 8 to 23 in the Methodist Church. But don't despair. 3Gen this year is going to be bigger, longer, and with more impact than ever before with the launch of 3Generate 365. Like the name suggests, 3Generate 365 is going to take place over 365 days. Launching on Monday, the event will give the three age groups the opportunity to discuss God in their lives, create a manifesto, and have fun, but in a digital atmosphere, in sessions called tune-ins, which will take place periodically over the year. The eagle-eyed of you may be thinking, wait, what about voting for the reps and youth presidents? Don't worry, these will still take place over the weekend that Free Generate usually takes place. But instead, everyone in the age ranges who registers will be given a unique code to vote via a new and improved app. There's so much planned, it's impossible to fit it all in here. So stay tuned via the Free Generate Rep Twitter and Instagram, the Free Generate Facebook page, and remember to register all your circuit's members between the ages of 8 to 23. Back to Luke in the studio.
Thank you, James. Although this year's conference wasn't what was expected, I'd like to give the thanks of all our district representatives to the Synod for choosing us as your reps. We pray that we have served you and served God in this responsibility. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you look forward to next year's conference report.